Elon Musk met with Benjamin Netanyahu this week and agreed that Israel must destroy Hamas. And I think Musk could destroy Hamas almost instantly by becoming their CEO.
Ah, yes. Who says you can't get a little humor out of genocidal hijinks by radical Islamist armies with AK-47s? Come on. There's a joke in there somewhere. And it's at Elon Musk's expense because he took away one of their weapons. Very, very upsetting. Hey, it's Monday morning. Welcome back. In America, on the brink, on the edge, on a razor's edge, because the left is here. And they've saddled up with Hamas. We call them the Democrat Party. I think they prefer Democratic Party, don't they? But really, they're just the Democrat Party. And they're quite mad, quite mad. You see, the New York Times has a big story on why we should really encourage children to change their genders. You know, because we wouldn't want the kids to do anything they'd regret, so they should change genders. If it weren't for illogic, the Democrats would have no logic at all. Honestly, were it not for double standards, liberals would have no standards at all. And as for logic, well, illogic is theirs, but logic itself, I think, not so much. We've got a lot of crazy Democrat. We got a crazy Democrat judge in Chicago, Illinois. You've heard of it, I think, Chicago, Illinois. And there's a judge there, Maryam Ahmad. And I don't know if she's affiliated with Hamas or anything, but a 19-year-old was busted, drug dealer apparently. He sting operation at a homeless camp on Lake Street in downtown Chicago. Pretty amazing. And the 19-year-old had 141 Ziploc bags of heroin, 230 knotted bags of crack cocaine, $1,100 in cash money, a bottle of liquid for coating stuff. He had a Glock 19 handgun. Who doesn't? Honestly, very nice pistol. He's 19 years old, and he's got a Glock. He's got 114 heroin packets, 230 cocaine packets. He's got liquid this and his Glock pistol. And the police arrested him because they're the police, you know. And they brought him in and put him in Hoosgow. Said, look at all this stuff. You're in big trouble, buddy. But Democrat Judge Maryam Ahmad determined that he should be released because, you know, what's he going to do? What could possibly go wrong here? And I want to get to that story a little bit later on because it's pretty crazy. But there it is. Oh, speaking of pretty crazy, did you see in Atlanta, Georgia? I talk about it from time to time. Last year on Earth Day, I love Earth Day. Don't you love Earth Day? I usually get a cheeseburger. The Earth Day, why a cheeseburger? Why not? I like cheeseburgers. The Earth Day last year, a Democrat went to the Supreme Court. Not because there was a trial or anything. And he set himself on fire. He doused himself in flammable liquids. And he thought he was a Buddhist monk. And he set himself on fire and said, we got to get out of Nam, man. And he didn't really say we got to get out of Nam, man. But he did set himself on fire at the Supreme Court last year on Earth Day. And it took him a few days, but he died. It was terrible. It's horrible. It's tragic. And, you know, every day is an IQ test. So we got that going. Well, let me share with you now from ABC Fake News. Protester sets self on fire in apparent, quote, political protest, end quote, outside Israeli consulate in Atlanta, Georgia. First of all, here's the most alarming part. We have an Israeli consulate in Atlanta. I didn't know that. That's kind of interesting. And a person went there wrapped, and it's for a couple of days. They didn't say anything about who the person was, or they kept calling the person they and their because I thought maybe it was transgender person. You know, a lot of crazy mass murdering transgender people these days, too. And it turns out it's a lady. It's a lady. Lights up the room like a lady. Well, you know, not normally by immolating, but there it is. Protest set self on fire. And we learned yesterday, it's a woman. Crazy. Now, that, I guess, constitutes women's liberation in the Middle East, I think. because you got the Palestinian flag. It's really the Hamas flag, even though Hamas has a separate flag. But right now, the Palestinian flag is the Hamas flag. And the lady went to the Israeli consulate in Atlanta and drenched herself in gasoline and set herself on fire. What kind of lighter do you think she used, Michael? I think a Zippo is probably the safer way, but who's got a Zippo these days? Because it might be difficult to use a Bic lighter. Maybe a blue tip match. That what you were doing with your thumbnail? Yeah, a blue tip match. Do it like that. That could do it. Crazy man. Yes, sir. Now, you know that the Hamas people, they're radical Islamic terrorist jihadis, and they have perpetrated many rapes of women, and possibly not just of women, because of the kind of people they are. But the headline from the radical left-wing extremists at Mediaite, beyond beeped up. I have to do an expletive deleted there. Beyond beeped up is in quotation marks. House Democrat Pramila Jayapal blasted by critics across the political spectrum, but not really, for comments on Hamas rapes. Comments on Hamas rapes, because they use rape as a weapon of war, which the Soviet Union did in World War II all over the place. And, you know, barbaric armies have been doing since dirt was new. But these savages in the Middle East are doing it now, weapon of war. And Pramila Jayapal is okay with it. Speaking of which, Michelle Obama was asked about it over the weekend also. And she didn't exactly come down with a hard line on using rape against women as a weapon of war. She kind of soft-sold it. It's crazy. Also in the Middle East, because it's the Middle Stinking East, the Iranian proxies in Iraq, where you're going to find some of them. You're going to find more in Lebanon and more in the Gaza and more in the West Bank, and you're going to find them everywhere. Egypt, you're going to find them lots of places. It's crazy. But the Iranian proxies in Iraq firing at U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria, and Joe Biden decided we had to bomb some of them, and they put out a quick press release that Joe Biden ordered a bombing in Iraq because, you know, the Democrats bomb more places than anybody. Barack Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize, and then he bombed more countries than any president since World War II. The number is eight countries, more than any president since World War II, more than George W. Bush at the peak of the wars after September 11th. But bombing Iraq, and this time they say they didn't hit an empty building. This time they want to assure us they killed 5. They killed 5 people who they say were now dead. Proxies, part of an Iranian-funded and armed radical group inside of Iraq, and this time killed 5, right? In fact, we got Barack Obama's defense secretary and CIA director one time, Leon Panetta, over the weekend at the Reagan Library in California, saying that he'd be much harsher than Joe Biden is being. But, you know, they're mad bombers. I mean, Leon Panetta's like the Unabomber. He's the duo bomber. But never mind that. So we got that. And then the USS Kearney, that's an American naval vessel, shoots down drones, plural, according to CNN, responds to ballistic missile attack on commercial vessel because the troglodytes, the Houthis, these are the rebels in Yemen. They're an armed Islamist force. They're funded by Iran, armed by Iran. They use AK-47s made in Russia. They kill people and kidnap people because they're like pirates, you know? And things don't change very rapidly over there. Thomas Jefferson was battling the Barbary pirates long ago. Now Joe Biden is going after him. So the USS Kearney, naval ship, shoots down drones, multiple, and responds to ballistic missile attack on commercial. They think the commercial vessel was somehow affiliated with Israel. So the Houthis tried to kill the commercial ship going by, and the United States responded. So we're in a shooting war, all right? And they're shooting at us, and we're shooting at them. That's a war. We're at war in the Middle East. If you score it by they're shooting at us, and we're shooting at them, which is pretty much how you do it. Also, suspect in attack that killed tourists and wounded more in Paris reportedly shouted, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. That's Allah is great. You know, God is great, Allah is great. That's what they say when they're killing people and stuff. So that in Paris, which is frowned upon in Paris. And here in the United States, we're just getting warmed up, I think. It's the world is just getting warmed up. Pretty crazy stuff. And as I said, Carolyn Glick, this is important stuff. Women's Affairs Minister Golan May revealed that Israel had repeatedly asked Michelle Obama to condemn Hamas's brutal systematic rape, gang rapes of hundreds of Israeli women on October 7th, and Michelle Obama hasn't bothered to respond. That is your Democrat Party. You know, they're the party of Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, and Lolita One, and Epstein Island, and all of that stuff, and Bill Clinton, of course, and Anthony Weiner, and childhood gender dysphoria. They're not the party of many good things these days, are they? Also, this is in Virginia, they've canceled the annual Hanukkah celebration and the lighting of the menorah, the lighting of the public menorah. They've canceled it out of fear. Fear is why they canceled it, and I'll explain. This is in the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, in the United States of America. Pretty amazing stuff. And so they put out a statement, in the cancellation. Well, it's because we're afraid that Democrats or jihadis, but I repeat myself, may show up and there could be violence. So they canceled it, and that's a victory for the jihadis. That's what we call soft jihad, cultural jihad, political jihad. Amazing stuff. Also, over the weekend, Hamas released Russian hostages. They released Russian hostages, and I was going back and forth. With my friend Anna on this, and the terrorists realize that Putin will kill them all, and so they're terrified of Putin because he's a communist, and they know perfectly well that the commies will come in and they'll kill your whole family, and then spit on you from an airplane because they don't care about human life because they're the left. See, communists. Although, what was the New York Times? Was it the New York Times the other day that said that Russia is becoming increasingly conservative under a communist KGB colonel, Vlad the Impaler Putin? They said it's because to them, conservative is just a dirty word that you call people, right? And that's pretty amazing stuff. It's becoming increasingly conservative, and Putin's Russia, he's a communist, more conservative. That's what it is. Sure, that's it. So the Russian hostages, they think one of them was already murdered, and they're not going to get that one back.
It was the AP.
Oh, it was the Associated Press. I apologize. The New York Times also sucks, but the Associated Press, they said that Russia is becoming increasingly conservative. Well, they got their kidnapped hostages back, except for the one that they killed, because they're terrorists and kidnappers and murderers and rapists from a medieval hell slithering out of cracks in the earth like the troglodytes that they are. But I've got that. And when I was going back and forth, I said, well, you know why these terrorists give back their hostages, don't you? So this story goes all the way back to the 1980s, and I'll explain that coming up. Joe Biden is not a bright man. And he had a weekend also. And the Muslims here in the United States are threatening him. They're saying they're not going to vote for him. He's got to depend on the jihad vote. It's part of his base. If you're not a genocidal anti-Semite, voting Democrat, then what are you? So we got that. That's they're threatening, the Muslims are threatening Joe Biden. It's another part of the soft jihad. And John Kerry, who is our climate czar, that's another Russian term, more Russian collusion, the Democrat Party. He went to the United Arab Emirates where he emitted some gas himself, which a lot of Democrats are in the habit of doing when there are microphones around. But well, you hear, they've renamed him Tutankhamun. Now they call him Tutankhamun because there was a microphone nearby, and John Kerry with gaseous emissions of his own. We're going to need more nuclear power, I think. So we got those going for us. And lots more. We're at 888-630-9625. 888-630-9625. Hey, it's Chris Plant. Excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Visit chrisplantcruise.com. Yes, sir. Now, we have a climate czar, and it's Boltneck, as everyone knows him. John Kerry, who honestly is the Boris Karloff of 21st century Democrat Party politics. Boris Karloff, of course, played Frankenstein's monster in the original Frankenstein movie, and he's the best real Frankenstein until John Kerry came along. And John Kerry frightens children. On Halloween, he just goes to the front door and he answers, and he holds his arms straight out, both of his arms straight out like this, and he goes, "Ugh," and the kids run away terrified because they can see evil. They know evil when they see it. Kids can tell. But we sent him over there because to the COP28 in Dubai, I understand our mayor, our Washington, D.C. mayor, is now home from her trip to Dubai. Because it's very important that the mayor of Washington, D.C. go to Dubai to talk about the weather because the weather is kooky out there. And our Democrat mayor, not very bright. We got a crime wave going on here to beat the band, the highest murder numbers in 2 decades. We got carjackings that make Kabul, Afghanistan look safe and pleasant. It's the place has gone mad. And she's off smiling up a storm with the gang in Dubai, talking about the weather. Now she's home. She's got a big event today. You know what her event is? Because she's just back from Dubai. And I went to the newsroom and I said, well, what's her event about? Is it about crime, about the crime wave? And no, it's not about. It was about the weather because she just got back from Dubai where she was talking about the weather. Did they give her like an honorary meteorologist thing or anything? No. It's not about that. What it's about is Black Restaurant Week. That's Restaurant Week. That's black. That's, Black Friday. They got the whole week. It's a whole week now. And Black Lives Matter Plaza. They just paid hundreds of thousands to repaint the logo in the middle of 16th Street in front of the White House, just across Lafayette Park from the White House. And the mayor is back. Don't worry about those murders or the carjackings or people fleeing the city. Don't worry about the mayhem. Just Black Restaurant Week. I see. I think she might be kind of a racist. What do you think? Oh, we got more Democrat racists for you, too. You know how racist they are. We got that. And Liz Cheney. We got Liz Cheney, too. Ooh, baby, it's a wild world. It's hard to get by just upon a smile. The Democrats are on the loose, and it's almost impossible to believe how screwy, that's very polite, but I'm on the radio, the Democrat Party has become. And now in the Commonwealth of Virginia, they have canceled a menorah ceremony, Hanukkah coming. The people in Virginia, I have the story here from UJC, Chai Lights, and statement on the second Sunday's cancellation of Hanukkah celebration. We should be very clear. It is anti-Semitic to hold Jews collectively responsible for Israel's policies and actions. You'd think, Jews in the United States? And to require a political litmus test for Jews' participation in community events, the United Jewish Community. Virginia Peninsula. The peninsula has a piece of Delaware, a piece of Maryland, a piece of Virginia. You got your Chesapeake Bay and your Atlantic Ocean there. The Jewish community of the Virginia Peninsula is shocked and alarmed at Love Light Placemaker's decision to cancel a menorah lighting scheduled for the second Sunday's Art and Music Festival. There was an art and music festival going on in Israel when the troglodytes attacked on October 7th. Am I right? Kidnapping, murdering, raping the Hamas, and now the Democrats they're with Hamas. It was scheduled for Williamsburg, Virginia, claiming it did not want to appear to choose sides in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Well, maybe you should also have like a Hamas event and hang gay people from trees. Then it'd all be equal. What do you think? I could probably do it. So they decided to cancel the event, and the reality is that, we want to choose sides, and they're afraid. It's fear. There's terror in the air because radical Islamic jihadis and the Democrat Party sending their children out as cannon fodder, which they do a lot for a lot of different causes. Now, the cancellation of the menorah lighting ceremony is, well, we don't want to appear to choose sides. It's about terror. It's about fear. That's what it's about. All right. And that's pretty kooky. Now, with that, let's go to a telephone call, Michael. Let's go to Kennedy calling from Manassas, Virginia. Kennedy, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, good morning, Chris. Good to talk to you, sir.
Welcome.
Yeah, I just want to talk about this this incident where they're, like you said, it's out of fear, and I think it's a great opportunity to talk about the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms and self-defense, because you can't be afraid if you're armed, and if you choose a gun to be armed, that's great, but being armed in any way and having that ability to protect yourself, nobody's going to sit there and tell you you can't light your menorah because I'll kill you. That's the fear. It's the fear of death. These terrorists are serious. They're not here to play games. They're not here to talk and ask nicely. They're here to threaten extreme violence in order to shut people down. It's what they did in Gaza and Israel on October 7th. They didn't walk in and say boo. They walked in. They started killing people. So that's the threat. That's the fear, is the fear of death. And the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms and self-defense is what prohibits bad people from doing bad things against good people. And so the Jewish community needs to stand up, show up at their menorah lighting and show up armed. If you want to talk about, the Second Amendment's about being in a militia, okay, fine. The Jewish community bands together armed, and there's your militia right there, and now have your menorah lighting ceremony and double dare the terrorists to come and shut you down. They tried it in Texas when they had the Muhammad artist contest, and they had an armed guy there, and he stopped the terrorists from committing violence. So, the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, is extremely important, and I think this is a great opportunity to encourage people, whoever's listening, if you can hear my voice, if you're not a gun person, get training and consider it, because it's important.
It is very important. The National Review has a story on it also. Inclusive, in quotation marks, Virginia Festival cancels menorah lighting, and we know what the reason is. Claims ceremony favors Israel. Now, why would you in the United States of America fear holding an event that favors Israel at the beginning of Hanukkah? And let me say this, Kennedy, because I recalled this from a couple of weeks ago. CNN was upset about this. With threats against American Jews, CNN story, with threats against American Jews on the rise, many have begun seeking firearms training and purchasing weapons out of fear for the safety of their communities and families, according to interviews CNN has been conducting with gun range operators, firearms instructors, and Jews in the U.S. in recent days. Now, this is a CNN story from obviously after October. This is November 6th. So after the attacks of October 7th. And, this is the Democrats. They claim to be anti-gun, and everything they do makes more people buy guns and more people get training and more people become gun people. And every gun store you went into for 8 years when Barack Obama was president, every gun store had a picture of Barack Obama with the caption, Gun Salesman of the Year. Because everything that Barack Obama did, threatening the left, always threatening to take your guns away because they're Stalinists, and that they're Kim Jong-un, and they want to take our guns away, and that causes gun sales to surge. Gun training, which is good, to surge, And now, and honestly, that there was a time when the not so long ago, African Americans buying guns in record numbers. Now you've got American Jews buying guns in record numbers, and it's, we're not, there is a certain amount of Islamic terror threat in the United States, but it's also the Democrat Party, Kennedy. It's the left-wing mobs out in the streets of New York and Washington D.C. who are violent and glassy-eyed, and they're crazy as hell. And, we got one in Atlanta that set herself on fire and self-immolated and apparently so far has survived. There's a fanaticism in America, the likes of which we have really not seen before. These
and Chris.
Yes.
And this is kind of one of those fundamental differences between the right and the left. Our cornerstone, the very foundation of everything the right believes, starts with the value of human life and self-defense. And the left does not hold value to human life. This is why they're pro-abortion, and this is why they're anti-gun, because they have no value for human life. And it's a fundamental, difference that we have.
There is another one in the middle of this story, too, and that's religious freedom and your freedom to practice your religion as you see fit. And, they have the Temple of Satan is a Democrat Party adjunct, and they have after-school Satan clubs in schools for grammar school children who they're spreading gender dysphoria to, and, LGBTQ, man on boy. The Democrat Party is so demented, but this is about religious freedom. It is, you're right about the Second Amendment. It's about freedom and liberty in the United States of America for individuals, for groups, to not live in fear of the mob. And make no mistake who the mob is here. There's a little bit of the Islamist thing, but I've got to say the bigger numbers and the bigger concern right now ought to be people on the left in the United States of America who are Democrats, Kennedy, and I know you know that.
Yep.
But it is crazy. And again, CNN...
One other thing.
Yes.
Just real quick, one of the famous sayings, the only thing that needs to happen for bad people to win is for good people to do nothing. And if you go back to World War II and the Gestapo and everything, if the Jewish community wasn't disarmed, it's a very big different story in World War II, because the Jews never get thrown into concentration camps necessarily, because if you're armed, again, you can't be, you can't be enslaved, you can't be imprisoned if you're armed and you're willing to fight, and if you're willing to stand up, and if good people stand up against this nonsense, it's not gonna continue.
You're 100% right, right, of course, and all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. And let me say this, the Jews got guns. They went to Israel. They created a nation where they could be safe, where they could defend themselves. And now the Jewish people are defending themselves in their tiny little spit of land with no oil on it. And the left here in the United States has turned against them. And maybe it's as simple as the fact that they're defending themselves now. And the left doesn't like people defending themselves against the brute force of savages, because, nobody kills like the left. Honestly, it's extraordinary stuff. Kennedy, good call. Thank you very much.
Thanks, brother.
And, women, we also had a couple of years ago, it might have been Pound Me Too related, the Democrats who were constantly assaulting women like Joe Biden and Bill Clinton and Hunter Biden, and the list goes on. And that's all fine because they're Democrats. And Harvey Weinstein, who leads the standing ovation at the Oscars for Harvey Weinstein, of course, an abuser of women and young women in particular for decades. And all the Democrats knew it, and they just laughed up their sleeve about it. He led the standing ovation at the Oscars for Roman Polanski, who's a fugitive from justice living in France, where it's okay to drug and rape 13-year-old girls in Jack Nicholson's hot tub. Hot tub. That's right. It was Jack Nicholson's hot tub. But the Democrats who claim to be anti-gun, I think they invest in Smith & Wesson and Ruger, and then everything they do leads to skyrocketing sales of guns, and they make out like bandits. Women a couple of years ago buying guns like they're going out of style, and now American Jews buying guns and getting training. And the reason is not the Islamists living among us. It's the left. Make no mistake. This is your Democrat Party's doing. Man, oh man. That's crazy. All right, this has caused some reaction here. Let's grab another phone call. Let's go to Chris calling from beautiful Marshall, Virginia. Chris, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Thank you for taking my call, sir. I've sadly had to drop off when several other times I was on hold. I'm very glad to get through, especially on this topic. There's a gun ownership organization that I don't want to name because I'm going to disparage it, and that is I've never been a member because they acquiesce too much. However, there's a crucial alternative to them, and there were survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto that formed something called JPFO, and that is the Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. I'm a Christian. I support Israel. I've been a member of JPFO since I learned about them in the late 80s, and they are worthy of our support. And I have an alternative to this chant that we keep hearing in these protests. How about from the river to the sea, Israel will be free?
Yeah, very good.
No other nation surrounding Gaza will accept these people. I wonder why.
Well, that's right. I just called it up, Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. It is, I was unaware of this organization until you just brought it up.
They suffer no fools lightly. They take no concessions, and they support the Second Amendment. People, check them out. They don't make concessions.
I just went to their website, called them up, and they've got headlines like "Death by Gun Control" and "No Guns for Negroes," which was another Democrat Party program, just by the way, many, many years ago. And it looks like a very interesting organization, Chris. I'm going to take a look at it. I was not aware of it, as I said. Very interesting. And I have friends.
I'm always eager to enlighten. Thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Thank you, Chris. And I've got, one of my great friends is a Jewish man, grew up in New York City. Didn't grow up in a conservative family. The world has, like so many of us, caused an awakening. And my friend has more firearms than in his personal possession than many police departments have. And he became aware of the need and that being a good idea quite some time ago. It's a crazy time out here. Also, a story I want to share with you today. The Russians, Putin, got his hostages back, except for the one that they murdered. But he got all his hostages back. We don't have all our hostages back. I have some idea, perhaps, why they chose to give Russia their hostages back, and I had to go back into a little bit of history, but I'll share that story with you coming up as well. Joe Biden and, of course, our climate czar flatulating loudly while speaking to the world at the COP28 summit in Dubai, where naturally he flew on a Gulfstream jet because don't you know who he is? And now I'm telling you, this guy is a gaseous catastrophe. Man, oh man, we are at 888-630-9625. So in the age of terror in the United States, they're canceling the menorah lighting in Virginia, of all places, which is pretty crazy. And they say it's because they don't want to appear to be choosing a side. Who are we to choose sides? Far be it for us. Come on. Now, the second Sunday festival in Williamsburg every month from March to December. And now the lefties have stepped in because they're pro-Hamas. And they want to call Jews terrorists and terrorist victims. That's why they're terrorists, because they're victims. Sure, it's been going on since before the United States existed, but never mind that. Let's grab. I see there's let me see. We had a caller dropped off. Rock it was. Who wanted to make a good point. They say in Virginia that they're canceling the menorah lighting event because they didn't want to appear to choose sides. When you canceled it, you chose sides. See how that works? This can be complicated. Maybe political decisions are not for everyone. But when you said, well, we're not going to have this because, the Jews or whatever, it's because of the lefties. That's the reality. In Williamsburg, Virginia, they're not concerned about a jihadi attack at a menorah lighting. What they're concerned about is leftists. We call them Democrats. They populate the news media and much of the permanent bureaucracy in Washington and beyond, and they're not on our side. That's the crazy thing about them, isn't it? Yes, it is. Now, let me share this story with you. A story broke over the weekend that the Hamas gave Russian hostages back to Russia. One, apparently, they murdered, but otherwise, the release of the hostages, and the Washington Post is very excited about it. Hamas release of Russian hostages highlights Putin's new Middle East stance. That's the Washington Post. They're lying. It's not Putin's new Middle East stance. Here's what it is. I went back and found a story from 1986. Kidnapped Soviets back before Ronald Reagan collapsed the Soviet Union. They had some Soviets kidnapped in Beirut in Lebanon. Kidnapped Soviets released through castration. I'm sorry, what? What is that? And here's the Los Angeles Times back in 1986. KGB reportedly gave Arab terrorists a taste of brutality to free diplomats. See, in Lebanon, a radical Islamic terror group kidnapped a number of Soviet diplomats and held them hostage. And they sent the KGB and they kidnapped the brother of the head of the radical Islamic terrorist organization. They severed his genitalia. They put his genitalia in a box and they mailed it to his brother, the head of the radical Islamic terrorist organization in Lebanon at the time. And then they shot him in the head and killed him, but not before severing his genitalia and sending it in a box. And the radical Islamic terrorist group said, man, these guys are out of their minds. And they gave all the hostages back.